Next Sunday we won't. Next Sunday night we won't be having Sunday night service, and then the next week we'll be doing the Awana. So we'll be sort of closed out and ready to start something new. And so if I don't change my mind and stuff, we're going to do a little study on a Sunday night about the demonic spirits and where they come from. And I've been studying about that. We're not going to take a long time about that, but I think everybody find it interesting, because I do feel like they very much at work here in a lot of the evil things that's going on in our world. So we in chapter 24. You ready, Mark? And if you're Facebook, if you're joining in with us, we're so glad that you're with us. And we in chapter 24, our last chapter. We see that David here, pretty soon as we get into Kings, and we'll pick back up after we do our study that we're going to do. We'll pick back up in Kings and probably do that, because it wouldn't be right just to leave David till we finish out David's time. And he dies right at the start of Kings, 1 Kings. But here we see that David, he's going to sin again. And there's something that we really can learn from this lesson tonight that we have here in chapter 24. He says in chapter 24, verse 1, "And again the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, Go number Israel and Judah." So we see here that David has decided to count the people. Now, God has already told David one time before, earlier in Samuel, to go count the people. Now, God told him to do it. And when God told him to do it, he did it as an encouragement for David, so David see that, hey, you know, I've got a pretty good sized army here and stuff. And so God did it as an encouragement. But now, David is doing it out of pride. And it's something for us to learn here at Iron Hill Baptist Church. And like I told Alan, Alan said many people want to know how many we was having in Sunday school and how many we was having at preaching. And I think people were excited. We didn't hear nobody worried about how many was here when we had a few, did we, Alan? And nobody cared, but now they've got excited a little bit and want to see the numbers. So I just want to say this, that we've got to be careful that we're doing it for the right reasons. David here, we'll see as we go through these next verses, he was doing it out of a mean of pride. And what it was, he wanted to see what he built. And I want us to be careful as we look at these numbers and everything that's going on at church to realize that everything's happened. Now, I don't take no credit for it, because I've been here a long time. And I'm doing the same things now I was doing before. Might not be doing quite as much because my mom's been so sick. But yet I see everything that happened. I know who gets all the credit, and that's God. And I don't mind putting the numbers in there and stuff, but we don't need to get puffed up about what's going on at Iron Hill Baptist Church and we begin feeling good about ourselves because of what's happening. Because I don't see where any of us has done that much. We've been faithful to do what God's told us to do. And so we have to be careful when we see these numbers and we talk about these numbers, that we don't do it in a boastful and prideful way, that we be careful that if we do talk about the numbers that we have here at Iron Hill Baptist Church, and it is a blessing, I'll tell you, but we have to be careful that we do it in a way to give God glory. But here we see that David, and what he's going to do, he's being puffed up by Satan to do this. And many churches do this. They're all about the numbers. They're all about the bank account. And that's all they talk about. And the main thing we should be ashamed of is no more people that we see getting saved in our church. And that's what we should be ashamed about. We shouldn't be puffed up about numbers, and because anybody can walk in and fill a pew. But we want to change lives. Now, I am happy that we've seen a lot of lives change, and I see a lot of people growing as walk through these doors at Iron Hill Baptist Church. And I'm just glad that God lets me be a small part of that. He don't even need me, but he lets me be a small part of that. I'm so happy. For the king said to Joab, the captain of the host, which was with him, Go now through all the tribes of Israel, from Dan even to Beersheba, and number ye the people, that I may know the number of the people. You notice that word I? David wanted it for him. He didn't say so the Lord would know. He says, so I would know. So Joab said unto the king, Now the Lord thy God add unto the people how many soever they be in 100-fold, and that the eyes of my lord the king may see it. Well, why doth my lord the king delight in this thing? Joab's trying to tell him, David, are you sure this is a good thing? Says, do you really want me to go out and count and get the numbers and bring back to you so you'll know how big your army is? And you see what God's give you great victories no matter what you did. But David says, notwithstanding the king's word prevailed against Joab, even though Joab tried to tell him, and against the captains of the host. And Joab and the captains of the host went out from the presence of the king to number Israel. Now we have to realize that the king, he gets his way. That's the reason he's king. And he's told Joab, I want to know how many people I've got, and I want you to go out and count them. So Joab, he was bold enough to come to the king. So, king, you sure you want to do this? Because he'd been with David a long time, and he'd helped David do a lot of things. So he felt comfortable in telling the king when he didn't think it was right. But David was adamant. So David, once again, had been convinced by Satan, not God, because God never told him to go number the people now, but he'd been convinced by Satan to go. Satan would do that to get your attention off of what's most important and get you focusing on other things. As a bank account might grow, as the number of people in your church might grow. All those things will puff you up and say, boy, we got it going on now. It can make you think if you don't stay humble in a way there and stuff, so boy, I must really be a good preacher, ain't it? Just look how these people coming and stuff, and you can start feeling good about yourself, and there's many preachers in that avenue that feels that way. But I'm humble enough to know it ain't none of me. It's all about him. And he's sending these people away, and I truly believe it's because we as a church prayed for this. And God saw that we were praying. God saw that we prepared, we built, we planned for this day, and God's decided to reward us for that. So we still give him all the praise and glory. And they passed over Jordan and pitched in Aroer on the right side of the city that lies in the midst of the river of Gad. And towards Jazer, he's just telling them now in all these verses, so where they were going to take the census. Then they came to Gilead and to the land of Tatim Hoshi, and they came to Danjan and about to Zidon, and came to the stronghold of Tyre, and to all the city of the Hivites and of the Canaanites, and they went out to the south of Judah, even to Beersheba. So when they had gone through all the land, they came to Jerusalem at the end of, how long did it take them? 9 months and 20 days. And Joab gave up the sum of the number of people unto the king, and there were in Israel 800,000 valiant men. This was his army. 800,000 valiant men that drew the sword. And the men of Judah were 500,000 men. Now, you wouldn't know this if I didn't tell you, but if you did a little bit of studying, in case you looked, in 1 Chronicles, it talks about some of the same things about numbering Israel. And it says that if you look at the list of the census figure that's in 1 Chronicles, chapter 21, verse 5, that the numbers don't match up with what we have now. But it said that there was 2 different writers taking 2 different numbers. They were close enough to do not let that bother you, and that they feel like the numbers that we have here in 2 Samuel is a more accurate count than what you would have in 1 Chronicle. And 1 Chronicle said Israel was at 1,100,000, and that the army in Judah was at 470,000. So they're pretty close, but they feel like the count that Joab and them did. So we see here that he went and did what he wanted to do. And because he did what he wanted to do, that David had sinned, because God did not like what David was doing. So we see in verse 10, and David's heart smote after him that he had numbered the people. And David said unto the Lord, I have sinned greatly in that I have done. And now I beseech thee, O Lord, take away the iniquity of thy servant, for I have done very foolishly. What did I preach to you this morning about being saved? You have to have what? Conviction. David, after he did it, he was convicted by the Lord. He saw after he got the numbers and everything, that wasn't a good thing that I did. Now, you might say David, and I'm sure glad that we got to study a lot about David. I'm sure glad David, in a way, is like he is, because I know there's a chance for me, because I keep messing up too. And I had to keep coming to the Lord and said, Lord, I'm sorry I messed up. We see David known as a man after God's own heart. We see David messed up a lot, didn't he? But yet, David, he knew God. And after he made these mistakes, he would come to God and he would say, God, I have sinned. Once again, he said here in verse 10, I have sinned how? Greatly. And that I have done. Did he put it on Joab or anybody else? He said, no, I have done this. And now, Lord, I ask you to take away the iniquity of thy servant. For when David was up in the morning, the word of the Lord came unto the prophet Gad, who was David's seer, saying, now the seer, if you understand, we've studied it through 2 Samuel, 1 Samuel, he's a sort of a prophet that can sort of see into the future that God speaks through to tell them what they should do. And so Gad was his seer, the sort of in-between between David and the Lord. And David's prophet Gad, seer, saying, go and say unto David. The Lord told Gad to go say unto David, thus saith the Lord, I offer thee 3 things. Choose thee one of them that I may do it unto thee. Now, grace hadn't come yet. I'm sure glad we don't have to go through what David's getting ready to go through. If you do wrong now and you get on your knees and come to this altar and you ask the Lord to forgive you, Jesus Christ died, you in a period of grace, and God will use his death as grace so you don't have to make the decision like David is. But David went in the period of grace. And so the Lord's going to punish David as he punished him before. Just so see how your memory is, when him and Bathsheba had the baby, how did he punish David then? The baby died. That was his punishment. That was a tough punishment, wasn't it? Child to die. But you did wrong, David. You had Uriah killed. But then he blessed David back with him and Bathsheba had a second child. And who was the second child? Solomon. And we're going to see how God blessed Solomon to be the king after David. So now we see that David is being told by Gad, you got 3 things to choose from. Now you think as I tell you these, what would you choose? So Gad came to David and told him and said unto him, your first thing, you can choose 7 years of famine upon your people. You know what 7 years of famine is like? No rain. You remember when Joseph in the New Testament, how was going to have 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine? And because Joseph could see, he stored up the grain. And then after, when the 7 years of famine come, they'd stored up enough. But now, the 7 years of famine was going to start right away. Think about how many people would starve if he chose that. The second thing, he said he would have 7 years of famine come unto thee in thy land, or wilt thou flee for 3 months before thine enemies? Well, you could think David was pretty good at fleeing, wasn't he? Saul chased him for a long period of time, and Absalom chased him for a period of time, and he fought the Philistines all the time. So you might think that he might would choose that. Say, well, that 3 months is not as bad as 7 years. So you reckon he might choose that? And then it says, you can choose 3 months before thine enemies while they pursue thee, or that there be 3 days pestilence in thy land. Pestilence in thy land is disease, just like what we have with COVID. And it would come, but it's only going to last for 3 days. Now Gad says, now advise and see what answer I shall return to him that sent me. So Gad said, what you want to do, David? So that's David's choice as a king. God says, you did wrong. You see you've done wrong. I'm willing to forgive you, but there's a price that you're going to have to pay. And look what David said in verse 14. And David said unto Gad, I'm in a great strait. I'm in a mess. That's what we Southerners said. We don't say great straits. I'm in a mess. And he said, I'm in a great strait. Let us fall now into the hand of the Lord. For his mercies are great, and let me not fall into the hand of men. Well, David didn't want to be pursued by his enemies for 3 days because he knew God's hand was not going to be with him. And David at that time was already an old man. old man, he wasn't able to fight you. Remember, I told him how his men said, you can't go out to battle and fight with us anymore because that giant just like to kill you last time. So what he's going to choose is not 7 years of famine, which was going to be 7 years of famine, but he was going to do 3 days of pestilence. Now, he knew it was going to be bad, and he knew many people was going to die. And he knew during that period of time that he could be one of the ones that get sick and die. But he'd rather have his hand or his punishment in the hands of the Lord than the hand of man. So the Lord sent a pestilence upon Israel from the morning even to the time appointed, and there died of the people from Dan even to Beersheba 70,000 men. Now we might think that's pretty bad. Well, what was the last count of COVID deaths in America? But worldwide it's over 5 million, wasn't it? Something like that. So, I mean, you put it in perspective and stuff, but this was in the first day. So after this happened, old King David probably said, this thing's a little worse than what I thought. I might better go and talk to the Lord again. And so when the angel stretched out his hand upon Jerusalem, because God sends his angels to do this. It says, when the angel stretched out his hand upon Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord repented him of the evil and said to the angel that destroyed the people, it is enough. Stay now thine hand. And the angel of the Lord was by the threshing place of Araunah, the Jebusite. And David spake unto the Lord when he saw the angel that smote the people and said, Lo, Lord, I have sinned, and I have done wickedly. But these sheep, the people that died, he said, what have they done? He said, let thine hand, I pray thee, be against me and against my father's house. But don't kill any more of my people, Lord. See, David was a king, a people for the king. A king for the people, I should say. He loved his people. And it hurt him that because of his sin, 70,000 died. So he intervened. And when he saw the angel, then he come to him and he says, let it be against me. Lord, make it upon me. Don't kill any more of these people. And Gad came that day to David and said unto him, the Lord wants you to go up now and rear an altar unto the Lord in the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. Now this is the same place, if you noticed in verse 16, where the angel of the Lord was by the threshing place of Araunah, the Jebusite. Now, because he called that off, Gad's telling David to go up, build me an altar unto the Lord in the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. And David, according to the saying of Gad, went up as the Lord commanded. And Araunah looked and saw the king and his servants coming on toward him. And Araunah went out and bowed himself before the king on the face upon the ground. Now, why was David coming? Because the Lord had told him to build an altar there at that place. And so he was having to go there to see Araunah about doing it. And when he came there, he bowed down before the king because he should show honor before the king. And Araunah said, wherefore is my lord the king come to his servant? What brings you out here, king? Because he didn't see him that often out in that area. And David said, to buy the threshing floor of thee, to build an altar unto the Lord, that the plague may be stayed from the people. Because God said, you don't want me to start back again. You do this for me, and we'll call it even. And Araunah said unto David, naturally, he didn't want to sell the king the land. He says, let my lord the king take and offer up what seemeth good unto him. And he even went a little farther and he says, behold, here be oxen. Here's my oxen, David. You can have my oxen to burn for the sacrifice. And here's the threshing instruments that you'll need to take to make wood so you can have it to build a fire for the oxen. And the other instruments of the oxen for wood. So Araunah, he wanted to come and give David everything. And King, I'm not going to charge you for this, but listen, this is very important to what David's going to say. And all these things that said did Araunah as a king given to the king. And Araunah said unto the king, the Lord thy God accept thee. But David the king said unto Araunah, nay, but I will surely buy it from thee at a price. Neither will I offer burnt offerings unto the Lord my God of that which doth cost me nothing. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 50 shekels of silver. God's showing us through this here that it's better than to receive gifts for something of that nature. It's better to buy it, and you've got something invested of yourself. See, if David had took it freely, God had told him something to do. David had nothing invested. At least David here had enough knowledge that the 50 shekels of silver that he bought it, then he would say, it's mine. I own it. And this is very important because this place that he's buying to build this altar is the place in Israel that Solomon's going to build the temple. At this location right here that David bought, if you search back out, at the present time in Israel, there's a mosque of Odom built there now. It's a Muslim mosque. But in end times, it's going to be torn down, and the new temple that's got to be built in Israel is going to be built at this location. And that's very important to realize that if David had not bought it at this time, that land would not be available to do all the things that God had planned for that land going forward. So David, it says, built there an altar unto the Lord and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. So the Lord was entreated for the land, and the plague was stayed from Israel. And we'll stop there. But I do want to say, you've noticed, I think the World Health Organization, didn't they say this past week that COVID was no more an issue? We don't have to worry about it. It just mysteriously has left. And I saw...
they're also trying to normalize all sex crimes.
no.
So you going to trust them?
I just talked to Randy and Gracie and Miss Joanne, and Randy and Gracie said they took Miss Joanne out to see her son. She got a son that stays in California, and so we happened to see them the other night. And so I said, "You'll go to California and get back and stuff." And said, "Yeah, preacher, we went." So guess what? So we flew out there, and the time we got there, we got COVID. Me and Gracie and Miss Joanne. So we all three got COVID. So me and Gracie was sick. Now Miss Joanne got along with it pretty good. They said our whole trip out there to California to see them people, we had COVID. And I said, well, where do you think you got it from? She says, I know we got it from the plane. And so it might not be a big deal, but it's still around there and stuff.
Here's the question. Now they said that COVID is not an pandemic anymore. So they basically decided that everybody doesn't have to be vaccinated and boosted. But on the same hand, they say they do. But they have admitted that natural immunity is like 20-something times more.
They're backing up.
And they proved that where? In Israel.
Yeah.
Because Israel was the first country for almost the complete population to be vaccinated. And they found out right away that they actually kept the coronavirus longer there because of that.
And they're having to...
So how do you trust any of that?
They're having to face up now and backing up, saying they didn't close the school down, but all of the kids' test scores now are coming in, and all of our kids are way behind in test scores.
And the question to that is, when they shut down them schools for a year, why is it all of a sudden now this year, this whole transgender movement with the state trying to have authority over parents to get children that say they have an issue acclimated into a system and take the rights of the parents away by state decree? Why is all that falling into place
I know.
now?
I know.
How
There's,
come you can't go to the store and buy aspirin until you're 18, but if your counselor or your teacher suggests that you have this state assistance for a drug that primarily the first thing that puts you on is going to neuterize your sexuality.
Yep.
So
Yep.
they're not even changing genders on these kids. They're basically just taking these kids and taking away the time for them to be counseled to where they think they are.
Well, I think they're trying to push an agenda. Even we see the Anheuser-Busch with the beer, Bud Light. But I think they're seeing that this is going to be harder than what we thought, because I think they thought the people wouldn't push back, but the people are pushing back. The parents are pushing back, and finally the women are speaking up, and I'm so glad. You women should be upset about a transgender male competing on the same platform that you are. So finally, I reckon they thought you women was just stay quiet and not say anything about it because you wanted to be a respecter of people, but the women are speaking up now, and so we just have to push back. And it's just like what happened in New York with the guy on the subway train. And now the Marine, I understand, he's getting charged for trying to do the right thing, and so he's gonna have to hire him a lawyer and going to have to see what he can do. But this guy's been locked up 40 times that this happened to, and it's bad that he died, but nobody else was doing anything. You got people that were being assaulted, and so him being a Marine, I reckon he just said, well, I'll help out. And that's the reason, if you wonder why nobody wants to get involved and nobody wants to do anything, there's repercussions. And people say, I'd better just mind my own business. And that's the reason it's sad that many of you in here could need some help, but help might not be coming because of that. Yes, Eugene?